that.
Welcome, everybody, to the Synapse Philosophy Group. I'm your host, Dr. Haig, John, Chiropractor, I like to say. And we've got a great group, Alan Lichter, Dr. Barry Hobbs, Carol and Bob Crystal. We love having everybody on here. And, we're on D.D. Palmer's 1914 book, The Chiropractor, page 48. Vertebral Adjusting is the title of this chapter. And I can't wait to get into it. And I'm going to start if everybody's ready. You guys ready? Let's rock it, okay? And I'm going to be switching around if you guys don't mind doing some reading. Okay, I'll pass the buck.
Ready to read.
Vertebral adjusting. The direct cause of disease, abnormal functioning, and morbid tissue is subluxated joints, about 95% of which are slightly displaced vertebra. The balance will be found in other joints than those of the vertebral column. There are no nerves between the articulating surface of the joints. Luxations of the toe joints cause corns and bunions. A dorsal vertebra.
I think we need to take just a second and annotate that he's been very clear here that abnormal function and morbid tissue in subluxated joints, 95% is the spine, and the rest of them are other joints in the body. That other joints can need care.
Yeah, and I have found that in my office, between 5 and 10% of the time is a joint dysfunction outside of the vertebral column, and right along with what Dee Dee says, I do adjust extremities, but it's about 5 to 10% of the time. Yeah,
there are injuries that happen in other joints. I mean, I've had a wrist injury recently, and my chiropractor has been adjusting my joint, my wrist. I've adjusted his knee. It allows the body to heal.
Yeah.
Adjusting the extremity or manipulating the extremity?
Well,
very specific adjustment.
I'm addressing the joint.
Very specifically adjusting that joint. All right. A dorsal vertebra displaced ever so little, twisted out of its normal alignment, disarranges the costocentral, costovertebral, costoarticulation, the juncture of the head of the rib with the body of the vertebra. A thoracic vertebra racked from its normal position affects the costotransverse joint, the articulation of the tuberosity of the rib with the transverse process of the vertebra. Its dislocation must of necessity displace the intervertebral articulation. The displaced bones of any luxated joint may impinge upon a nerve, or by their displacement cause a nerve to be stretched, thereby creating inflammation. A dislocated vertebra cannot do otherwise than displace 2, cervical and lumbar, 4, 11th and 12th. Now, hold on. What's he saying here? A displaced vertebra cannot do otherwise than displaced 2. And then he has in parentheses here, cervical and lumbar, comma, 4, and then 11th and 12th dorsal, or 6th and the first and including the 10th dorsal articulations causing nerve tension. What is going on in that sentence? This is the most unclear that Dee Dee has been so far, if you ask me.
In the cervical spine, there's 2 dislocations because there's no ribs. Cervical and lumbar, there's no ribs, so there's only 2 articulations that can be involved.
But why is it
in the I don't know why it says 11th and 12th dorsal here, because there's 4 in the if you've got a rib, then there's 4 articulations that can be involved. Or 6, first 2 and including the 10th dorsal. That I can't fully get to.
I'm not grasping that 100% of what he's really trying to convey there.
We said because he talked about the ribs. So you've got the joint, the facet joints and the costovertebral joints. So you've got two vertebral articulations in the cervical spine, right?
Yeah.
On each bone. In the thoracics, because you have ribs, you've got the costovertebral joints are 2 more articulations that can be involved.
Right.
So that's 4 in those.
And
when
then
it gets to 6, I'm getting lost.
Well, 6 because some of them having the demifacet, the ribs having the 2 articulations, right? This demifacet, and then the 6th, first and including the 10th dorsal, but the 11th and 12th dorsal, 4 articulations. Is that because he's talking about the floating ribs? I'm not 100% sure.
It's a little confusing, but I don't want to get hung up on it.
Well, and we don't want to get hung up on it exactly, Alan. And why don't do you mind taking over right there where it says some authors?
Sure, I got it.
And then we'll hand off to Barry in a little while. Or unless Carol wants to read.
I have a note on the side next to that where I say read BJ ? So some authors.
Some authors meaning BJ.
Maybe, yeah. Some authors on chiropractic state and use cuts to show how nerves are pinched because of occluded intervertebral foramina. The closing up of foramina attributed to accidents or a settling together of vertebra. These writers now use the word impingement instead of pinch. Seeing the founder of chiropractic makes use of that term, yet they do not comprehend the difference between a nerve being impinged against and one pinched between 2 harder substances. There are no intervertebral cartilage between the atlas and occiput and the atlas and axis that by compression might narrow or occlude the intervertebral foramen. Atlas luxations are the cause of a large percent of diseases, which may be relieved by adjusting the displaced atlas. The displacement of other joints than those of the vertebral column cause nerve tension, a stretched condition. Disease will result, and yet no possibility of a nerve being pinched. I find that disease is caused by displaced vertebra or other joints pressing against nerves. Nerves are stretched because of displaced bones. The replacing of a displaced portions of the neuroskeleton releases tension. Consequently, the conditions which cause disease are relieved.
Now, he did mention that in 1910 about the atlas causing a great deal of the dysfunction in the system, but there's no nerve pinch, right? But what we're really looking at is, subluxation at the brain stem, where we're really talking about spinal cord, not peripheral nerve.
Okay. But it was interesting because I think he definitely is referring back to BJ here because when he's talking about the impinged versus the pinched, and that whole complex is he's taking a smack at his son there.
And then that's why I think he's really mentioning the atlas. It is very important, and he knows that is the important thing. And I don't know when, Barry, you might know a little bit more of the history of the of BJ's work at the atlas and upper cervical. When did he really start that? It could have been around this time. Am I correct?
48.
Yep, it was from this time, and then really in 24 it started with the neurokilometer and the research clinic from 34 to 51. So it's being developed. It's being developed during this time.
It's being nurtured. What year was the volume 18 written? What was that? 1920s or something, or 1918?
Should be 1934.
1934. That's right. Okay, so it's much later, but he was still working on this on atlas subluxation at the time for sure.
Yep. So the neuroclimeter was invented in 24. Well, technically in 23 was the patent, and then it came on in 24. And that's where the HIO and the Atlas really started catapulting forward.
Interesting. Thank you for that.
And what's interesting is this paragraph here that we're talking about is also the difference in the philosophies and theories. You know, Dee Dee's talking about the cord, you know, pressure impingement, where BJ was talking about the pinch. And it was the difference in the theories and philosophies where, you know, Dee Dee is finding this, where BJ was trying to develop all of our principles and procedures.
Interesting insight. Thank you for that. That makes a lot of sense. Alan, should we keep reading?
Good. All right. The spinal cord does not entirely fill the vertebral canal. The wide space, or rather 3 spaces, intervene between its surface and the walls of the canal. This arrangement affords freedom of movement of the vertebral column without undue pressure or tension on the spinal cord. 2 of these spaces are contained and surround the spinal nerves as they pass through the foramina, affording the same freedom of pressure to the spinal nerves as is accorded to the spinal cord. The difference in height of a man at 25 and 80, barring abnormal curvatures and luxations, considering the natural shortening or approximation of vertebrae, does not exceed 1 inch, usually less than half an inch. This shrinkage in height must be divided between 29 articulations from occiput to ankle. A slight bending of the neck of the femur should also be included. Vertebrae have epiphyseal.
Now you know why I handed it off to you.
Epiphyseal annular plates on the upper and lower surfaces of their bodies. Each are developed from an ossifying center of the 15th to the 20th year and join the body of the vertebra by the 25th year. These epiphyseal plates are thickest at the circumference, gradually thinning toward the center. A vertebral column at or about the age of 15 will show the various stages of fusion of the vertebral bodies and their surface plates. Bear in mind the distinction between the vertebral plates and the intervertebral fibrocartilage discs. The cartilage of the former become ossified and eventually a part of the bodies, while the latter always remain cartilage. The point I wish to notice is that the epiphyseal rings at the age of 25 are quite prominent. As age advances, they approximate the height of the center of the intervertebral surface. Dividing this contraction of the vertebral column and the limbs among all the articulations, it would average 1/30th of an inch. It should be also remembered that the spinal nerves become slightly contracted in length, firmer and narrowed in their diameter as age advances. I think this is amazing in that the amount of detailed research he's done and the measurements he takes and the study he's done as far as how aging in normal affects the spine, and how it's in a healthy person, it doesn't affect the impingement. Other things are causing the problem, not losing height because you're getting older.
Yeah. And, you know, when I'm thinking of this, it took these 2 men and their attention to detail, you know, father and son, this bloodline, and having that wherewithal and in really, you know, digging for truth and information and attention to detail. Bear, you unmuted. You got something?
I'm jumping on the bandwagon here. I completely agree. This is absolutely very detailed information. I mean, this sounds like an orthopedic doctor talking to you, and it's actually Dee Dee Palmer, our founder, who's left high school in Canada to come to be with his family in America, and for him to know this epiphyseal plates and 29 articulations from the occiput to ankle, this is amazing for our founder to be this detailed. And it reminds me that anytime somebody wants to talk about, you know, he was a fishmonger, or he was this or that, This shows the complete opposite here. Extremely brilliant individual.
Brilliant.
I know that I've read about his traveling library, that wherever he went, he carried books, lots of books with him on horseback most of the time and he was always working on stuff. Yeah.
Barry, what was that that he had made, that carriage he had made, the hot rod of the day, the Corvette carriage?
Just unplug it.
It started with the V. I forget what it was
I
called.
can't remember.
But yeah, the custom horse carriage to go take care of house calls.
Well, you think about this too. A fishmonger, raising bees, all the stuff that this man did. Where did he find the time? He is probably at this time of in American history, maybe even world history, he was probably the most learned person about the vertebral system in the world. Did the most amount of research, compiled it, and compiled the his specimen collection. I mean, undoubtedly. What do you guys think?
And this is at a time where you had to travel on horse and buggy to go to a library to hope that they had a particular book that had the information to pull it out and research it.
Yeah.
This Google was not around. I don't even think the U.S. Postal Service was even around then.
Or the Dewey Decimal System. Think about it. Not even the Dewey Decimal System. Hey, Bob.
Roberts.
Yeah. Well, not to mention also, well, I'll mention it, which something that we've already talked about, and that's that he had like the most huge amount of osseous whatevers, you know what I mean? Like everything. Yeah. I mean, who in the world would figure out how to find all this stuff? Yeah. Even now or back then or anytime. It's incredible what he found.
I've had a tough time getting a decent spine model out there, and he's got all these cadaver spines, all over the place, It's amazing. Should we keep going and finish this up?
Let's rock. This slight difference mentioned in the length and diameter of the 31 pairs of nerves, which arise from the spinal cord and pass out between the vertebrae, would fully make up the trivial variation found in the length of the spinal column and the size of the intervertebral foramina in adult and old age, as much so as that found in the advanced stages of growth from infancy to adult age. Kyphotic persons, known as humpbacks, will compare favorably regarding health and longevity with those who have not deformed backbones. When we consider that the spinal cord is freely movable within the spinal canal and that the spinal nerves are afforded ample space for their emergence from the intervertebral foramina, we will see that normal movements do not compress the spinal cord or spinal nerves. The very slight difference in the size of the spinal foramina between the age of 25 and 80 would not be worth considering. Take into consideration the play, the amount of space between the occipital and the posterior arch of the atlas, and the size of the nerves that pass out over the grooves, and between the atlas and occiput. There is no intervertebral cartilage, only a very thin hyaline articular cartilage, which, if its thickness is shrunken by half, or if it was at all absorbed, would make as appreciable.
Alan, we lost your sound. Alan, you muted by mistake.
Yep, I bumped the button as I was turning the page.
Okay, there you go.
I'll go back. Which, if its thickness was shrunken by half, or if it was all absorbed, would make no appreciable difference in the size of the gap between the atlas and the occiput, sufficient to compress or pinch a nerve. Even if such were the case, would not the bending of the head forward over so little relieve the compression by enlarging the gap? Take your spinal column in hand. Do you not see that there is no intervertebral cartilage between atlas and axis and the occipital bone in the first vertebra? Do you not see that the long, wide gap between the atlas and axis affords no possible chance for nerve compression, no more than there is between the atlas and occiput? If you think the first or second spinal nerves can be pinched, compressed, or squeezed by the approximation of the atlas and the axis, or the drawing together of the occiput and the atlas, just try to explain such a condition to your next prospective patient. The same kind of pressure that causes corns and bunions and many diseases which arise from the impingement or change in the amount of tension of the first and second pairs of cervical vertebra must also cause disease elsewhere. The nerve
What page
must,
is he on now?
50.
Oh,
The rule must hold good throughout the body. The filaments of the nervous tissue create heat and transmit impulses. It is the only structure which can increase or decrease the amount of heat, increase or decrease the velocity of impulses, or modify the force of reflex action, the bounding back of the impulse. Remember, the amount of function depends on the renitency, the impressive force obtained by the bounding back. Ease and disease depend upon the condition of nerves. Nerves furnish innervation and heat to all parts of the body, whether in normal amount or more or less than normal. The organs of the body perform their functions normally when nerves are at ease and vice versa.
So he doesn't explain where the subluxation of the atlas, if it's not impinging nerves, what's it doing? To me, it's pressure at the brainstem. And, what do you think why is he doing this little rant right now?
I believe that he's doing this. I believe he's doing this for several reasons. One, anatomically, he's stating the facts that are there. Not only BJ, but all the other students, the original students, he had told them, when you have your diploma, you're also able to go out and teach this thing called chiropractic. And most of them, of course, were not as intelligent and educated as D.D. Palmer. So here he is, years later, 10, 15 years later, correcting them. And he's also stating his ground of his work here and research to the medical profession, not to the chiropractors, because they've always challenged us. Well, you can't have it. He explains why here. And the key thing here, if you notice this, it's that tension on the tone. It's the renitency. It's the nerves sending the impulses, and it's the vital force energy, the electric healer that Didi is, that he's talking about. This is mental impulses that's trying to travel down. You can have pressure and tension, and that's going to impinge some function, whether it's in the foot or whether it's in a cord, in the vertebrae, whether it's dorsal or lumbar. So I think he's really trying to debunk the pinched nerve theory.
Right. Because there is no way for it to be a pinched nerve in that area. So he's saying, we're not saying it's a pinched nerve in the atlas. It is something else causing problems. And for someone who's never had their atlas adjusted and then having their atlas adjusted for the first time, it is an awakening. I mean, 90% of the time. Am I right? I mean, you guys have all seen that of like, whoa, what was that? Or their ear just turns red, like, wow, it just got so hot. Just kind of like what he talks with the bunion or what have you,
Well, but he's also saying, he talks about so much about pinched nerves, and he says they can't be pinched up there, but he also talks about nerves can be stretched.
Exactly.
And then so the misalignments in the area of atlas axis and occiput atlas, the nerves can be stretched there by dysfunction in those bones or malposition of those bones, even if they're not being pinched. And the stretched nerves also cause lack of ease and dis-ease.
Oh yeah. That's the renitency.
And he says that very clearly in there.
Oh yeah.
So I think that's where he's going with that. He says it can't be pinched here. When we're saying that, don't come to me and say, well, look at this, there's all this space, it can't be pinched. No, it can't, but the nerves can be stretched there by those misalignments, and that can still cause the problem.
You guys keep going 1 second. I've got to show you something. I'll be right back.
Talk amongst yourselves. I gotta say, Barry, you got all that electric coming out of the sign behind you. But if you look at Carol, she's got that light shining down. It's like rays coming down from above. When the real deal is in her house.
I got
You
you.
see
Well,
that?
you have the white halo behind you going on, so
Hey, can you see this? My daughter just made a subluxation model for fourth grade science fair.
Move
Okay.
it closer to your camera.
Okay. What it is, okay, there's an autonomic nerve system just for reference, right?
Okay.
So we have the craniosacral pump, which is a pump that goes on the drill down into a bucket, right?
Oh, cool.
To flow through, this is CSF demonstration. This is not subluxation, but CSF. And then a valve to inhibit that flow of CSF back to the bucket down there. Here's the subluxation. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
I think that was really cool.
Great.
And then it'll inhibit the flow, because that's one thing in SOT we talk about it a lot more than the rest of chiropractic. When that subluxation is there, CSF, even just in engineering principles of hydrodynamics, affect the function of that whole system.
Sure.
I think CSF is very important. This was her CSF demonstration. How do you like that?
That is cool.
she got all that from her mother, right?
Oh yeah, of course. Absolutely. Thank goodness she looks like her mother too. Wow. So, we got through a lot of DD right now of our philosophy, our science, and we haven't talked a whole lot about the art. I would love to know about the art of DD, and hopefully we get to some of that. Does he go through much of this? Do you guys know?
I don't
Not
remember.
really.
It's been a long time since I read all of this.
Yeah. So
But I remember he kept it very private.
What's
at the
that?
very front.
But from what I remember, he kept the art of it very private.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would really like to know more about his adjusting, because he talks about early in the in the adjusting we used a closed hand, and now we don't have it. We have an open hand that we adjust. I remember those descriptions, but he didn't describe his adjusting very much, and I'm very, very curious about it.
Mhm.
If anybody listens to this and you have good insights on it, I'd really love to know. Send us a message so we could all talk about it. Should we go on to this next chapter?
We can start. We may want to ask Simon if he has any information on that. He might know where some of that is.
Absolutely. Plus, we can get some people to do some research too and get them involved in green books is my whole intention. And then we could ask Simon too. Because I'd like to see people really looking some of this stuff up and quoting properly, which, continually people are quoting incorrectly. So yeah. Barry, you want to read a little bit of this one?
Sure. Center place and second center place. Pathologists tell us that hemiplegia is usually due to cerebral disease. The condition is due to hemorrhage, embolism, or thrombosis. An escape of blood into one side of the brain arrests the action of this organ, so that the part of the body which is moved by nervous influence of this side of the brain is paralyzed, due usually to a lesion of some part of the corpus striatum and internal capsule of the crus cerebri, or of the cortex or subcortex of the opposite side of the brain. A.P. Davis claims that osteopathic treatment offers better results than can be derived from any other source known, for the reason that blood, arterial blood to the parts, is the only tissue builder and preserver.
We should note that this is all that whole section is in quotes, and he's talking about he's talking about Still in his work in that paragraph.
One of my earliest discoveries was that hemiplegia, paralysis of the lateral half of the body, was due to a displaced sixth dorsal vertebra. That displacement of the articulations caused extreme nerve tension. That by replacing the luxated vertebrae, the nerve, or rather the fibers of the sixth dorsal nerve, resumed normal tension and normal function. Normal functionating. And normal functionating. All right, never heard of that word. Functionating. In some cases, it is alternate, one half of the body and the opposite side of the face, where it may affect the affect the lower limb on one side and the upper limb on the opposite side. If the paralysis does not include the face and head, but the balance of the body, look to the cervical. In facial hemiplegia, paralysis of one half of the face, look to the cervical. Infantile hemiplegia, birth paralysis, look to CP. Hemarrheumatism affecting a lateral half of the body, look to CP. Paralysis and rheumatism are opposite conditions. One exhibits too much function and the other a lack of action and sensation. Adjust center place for diseases which affect the whole body or a lateral half. Knowing the region of dislocation, it is easy to locate the displacement and the affected nerve by noting the contour of the spinous processes and nerve sensation by palpation. The ganglionic nerve chain extend from the occiput to the coccyx, fibers of which extend into the cranium and become a part of one or more of the cranial nerves. The double axial vertebral nerve chains are distributing agencies for the nerves of organic life. They control the circulation of the blood, respiration, nutrition, and all the vital processes. They are the involuntary nerves, not directly under the control of the human will. They are connected by communicating nerves, one with the other, and with the various organs, blood vessels, and viscera. There are many diseases which are caused by a displacement of the 6 dorsal vertebrae. To illustrate, typhoid fever is the result of decaying animal and vegetable effluvia, a subtle emanation of a noxious morbific character, having an injurious influence on human beings when inhaled. Poison act on and contract the nervous system. Contracted nerves act on muscles, pulling vertebrae out of alignment. Vertebrae out of alignment, stretched nerves cause increased contraction, vibration, and heat. Excess of heat causes necrosis in those organs, or parts to which the fibers of the 6 dorsal nerves end in and innervate. Local inflammatory conditions occur, such as necrosis and separation of the intestines, lungs, spleen, liver, and degenerative changes in the kidneys. The vertebral ganglionic chains distribute fibers to various parts of the body, carry involuntary impulses, whether normal or abnormal, create functions which result in health or disease. To use the language of pathologists, the system reacts in some way as yet unknown to check its progress and to bring it to a termination at the end of 4 weeks. It is impossible to cut short the disease. In some cases, the symptoms of typhoid continue for months or years. This unlimited condition is known as ambulating or walking typhoid.
Let's pause right there. There's a lot of mouthfuls, right, and all that stuff. And, he's talking about, diseases, how to look for it and what to do. This is clinical stuff, right? Running practice. What'd you guys get out of this?
I think part of it was what you were asking about is adjusting, not the direct techniques, but looking at where to look for certain areas and how to address certain areas and how to find them.
He's talking about your
areas
clinical
are that need
efficiency.
to be adjusted,
Right?
and looking at this, looking for heat, looking for changes in the spinal and the dorsal parts of the spine that are showing the spinuses and being misaligned there.
Well, I say we pause at that point. I've got to help finish this science project for tomorrow's science fair. But B, this is a good stopping point. We could pick up here. What do you guys think? We pick up in this spot.
I'll mark it in my book.
Mark it in your book. And I really enjoy being on this. I'm stoked to have all you guys on here. I didn't get the post out very quickly today. Amazing things happened and I didn't get to it, but I got it out in the last minute. And you guys have all been here for a long time, in and out, but we have a really good crew and a lot of great insights from all of you. And I really appreciate you because I learn a lot every time. I do this for myself. If I get something out of it, you know, that's a big plus, and hopefully somebody else does too. And I
Mm.
feel blessed to be around with you guys and ladies. Excuse
I
me.
love that we can have these discussions. It's so stimulating for me. It's just I really enjoy it, and I appreciate all of you for being on these calls and sharing. And
Well,
Hank, for you doing all the work to make it happen.
well, thanks, and I'm doing my best to get these. Portuguese is very easy for me to get. I got a guy that'll do it. It costs me $1 a minute. Okay, that adds up very quickly. You have no idea. And the Spanish is a little bit more difficult because a lot of people, we can get it done, or I've been losing people in the process. But we were getting out in Portuguese, and the students in Brazil get very little of the philosophy. There's some great people like Fernando down there that are really teaching a lot of philosophy. They're awesome. And he and I got to hang out in Mexico, which was absolutely amazing. And those schools in Mexico are blowing up too. So, you know, all this gets around the world, and I appreciate you. And, you know, and I feel we're doing a justice to chiropractic for chiropractic as well.
I just recently somehow been in contact with a chiropractor in Japan that posts philosophical things periodically, and it's interesting because he must be writing them in Japanese, and then Google translates it and doesn't always get it right. And I sometimes write to him and say, you may want to check these words when you're putting them out. But I'm going to try and remember to send him a link. I don't think it's a good time for him, but I know they're up online, and I think he'd be valuable for him because he's trying to spread chiropractic philosophy in
Is it
Japan.
Sachio?
No,
Sachio?
no, I don't think that's his name.
There's a lot of great guys out there. They're very principled. And I'm moving some of this YouTube over to Rumble. I don't know if it's a safer place, but I'm down to, like, you know, to one warning left on YouTube, and then they delete all your videos. So I'm really looking for somebody to help me get all this over to Rumble, and so we don't lose any. I've got 1914 on there, but I've got the playlist from YouTube to upload to Rumble as well from all those pages. I might be able to hire somebody to do it, but we're really getting this so we can have it for lifetimes past us. Because who knows, you know, maybe people might not be might not be taught to read in the future for all we know, which seems like it might happen very quickly. But anyway, well, bless you guys. Thank you very much. Have a gorgeous night. I'll see you next weekend. Oh, next Tuesday, excuse me.
Good luck with your science project.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Have fun.
Peace out.
Bye-bye.